there. You're tuned in to the Inspired Hive podcast, where we bring together a community of leaders, creators, and innovators. Each episode is inspired by targeted conversation and power insights that will help you thrive in business and life. If you're ready to level up your leadership and fuel your success, you're in the right place. I have with me today Jenna Renee Soto, and she is a real estate investor, entrepreneur, and a professional barrel racer whose journey is founded in discipline and is forged by real-world experience. She is a master of reinvention, having served 9 years in the military and almost 2 decades of experience working with reconnaissance. She has transitioned into entrepreneurship. Jenna co-founded the Monroe Group and has a rapidly growing real estate investment portfolio. She's the author of the Enough series. It's focused on identity, resilience, and building your life on your own terms. Let's listen in. Welcome to the podcast, Jenna.
Thank you so much. I'm just so happy to be here and glad we could connect.
I am so inspired by your heart of service and how you've turned the foundation that you've gained through military experience into now helping others grow and grow their dreams and see a process that can be possible. And I'm so looking forward to this conversation today.
Well, good. Yeah, I feel really inspired and just called to share my story, and hopefully in doing so it's able to help others and maybe fast forward over a few of the harder parts in their story. So that's really where that comes from, but I recently have just really felt called to share. So
I love that so much. And the Inspired Hive community is really about helping others hear the nuggets of the things that we've journeyed and taken away and maybe help their process a little faster. Maybe not always smoother, but I think if anything, if we can share lessons that help others understand what that process is and where that kind of growth comes from, to me that's the inspiration of this whole podcast.
yeah, absolutely. And from what I've listened to, I really felt connected to you, and I think we have a lot of like-minded listeners, so hopefully it's mutually beneficial. But I like what you said, and it reminded me of something I learned along my journey with Tony Robbins. He said, you can turn decades into days with the right guidance. And there is something to be said, not that it will make the road any easier, but being able to anticipate some of the problems helps you recover faster and just lets you know that you're not alone. And I think for me, that's the biggest part, just being surrounded by other people who are like-minded and want to grow. And they've also experienced some form of failure or defeat or been low before. And it's nice to just see them rise again. And like seeing that lets me know you can too. And I hope that that's something that our listeners will get out of this today.
Oh, I love that so much. And I love what you said about, like, if you've heard somebody else go through a journey that, it can be a significant life challenge. But if you've heard a little bit about what they've traversed and maybe have some ideas of how you might address that yourself beforehand, not that we wish challenge upon people, but if you have that knowledge ahead, you're in a very different place when things happen. And I think, to me, that really carves a path of resilience for folks that's very
Yeah.
different than if we don't have anything to fall back on when
Yep.
challenges occur.
It reminds me of people's first heartbreak. And maybe there's some people that don't ever have to experience that, but for the majority of us, that first heartbreak is so devastating, you really cannot hardly even, be told what that's going to feel like. But then, if you get broken up with again, it is also heartbreak, but it never stings quite as bad because you realize you have the capacity to heal. You will meet someone new. You're going to be okay no matter how devastating it is. And I think that's kind of like life. I mean, I would love it if everybody could skip all of those valleys, but just knowing that there's others out there who have overcome, so much more. Honestly, it's easy to get tunnel vision and think that you're the center of the universe and that the things that are happening to you are the worst possible things in the world. And at the time it may feel like that, but to get a little bit wider view and some perspective and to just kind of see, the other people in the world, what they're dealing with, and honestly how lucky we are just by being born here, being able to pursue goals and dreams. Like, these challenges are actually great challenges to have, and you can change your perspective a little bit and be thankful for them, realizing that's making you a better person versus kind of a victim mindset, I would say, where when you had never experienced failure or, heartbreak or setback, it's really easy to just stay in your own little world, say poor me, and think that, that this is it. There's never going to be another sunny day.
Yeah, the perspective is so much, and it's a slight shift, but a giant difference in
Yeah.
terms of the words we use or how we view whatever that experience is. Um, Jenna, I'd love to hear kind of where your story began.
Okay. Well, I'll back up to how I grew up. And I love that you're from North Dakota. I feel like neighbors because I grew up in western South Dakota on, a ranch that was miles and hours away from the closest big town. I think the town that I was closest to was 675 people, and my high school graduating class was like 23. So we really were out in the boonies.
Yeah.
But my family raised cattle and sheep, and my dad actually inherited the ranch from his great granddad, who homesteaded it in 1909. And this is kind of like, if you've ever seen Yellowstone, it's sort of similar to that. So we had a huge ranch. It was honestly close to 10,000 acres, which is almost unfathomable for people to think of today, because like now I have 5 acres and I think this is a lot to take care of. So growing up, I didn't even realize, the feat that my family had just in operating a ranch at that size with that many, livestock, and then to have 3 kids and try to get us set up for future and, send us off to college and help us do what we love and enjoy. But it was pretty easy. My whole family fell in love with horses, so we mainly focused on rodeoing. And so every spare weekend or, spare moment I spent riding, and I really carried that throughout my whole life. I still have horses today. And big part of my story is becoming a professional barrel racer, but that kind of happened after the military. So yeah, I loved the way that I was, brought up, but I wanted to go see the world. So that kind of led me to join the military. And I think most people that get in, they have some type of connection, like a close family member that was in it or something. But for us, we really didn't. It was my sister who really forged that path. She decided to join. And basically, I thought, if Trisha can do it, I can do it. That's literally what I thought. I had no
Best
idea what
laid
I was
plans, right?
doing. But I ended up spending 9 years in the military and then came back as a contractor to spend around, 2 decades in that world. So it's crazy that one little decision really shaped who I ended up becoming. But I never did make it back to South Dakota after I left, just for, shorter visits, but never to live. But I live in Oklahoma now.
All right. Well, first off, thank you so much for all that you have done to contribute to our freedoms today. I think that is a huge piece of sacrifice, but also a huge experience that a lot of folks don't have a full appreciation of. I'm a mom of a military member, and there is a lot that goes into the service.
Yeah.
And there's a lot that you gain from that service. But I think even more so, there's a lot we all gain from that service. So thank you so
Yeah,
much.
absolutely. And I will say, when someone in the family decides to join the military, it isn't just about that one person, it affects the entire family. And I absolutely didn't realize that in the beginning, but it's unique in that most people may never experience what it's like to send a loved one overseas or to not have a say necessarily in where they're going to go next. So it is a huge sacrifice, but it's also, in part due to the families and the support that's behind us.
Mhm. Your sister you mentioned was kind of leading the path there. But I imagine there's a number of experiences that helped you in terms of your resilience, in terms of kind of your foundation for all that you're doing now. Is there anything that stands out in that for you?
Oh, absolutely. The first thing that comes to mind is my dad. He was such a great example. Growing up, he always tried to tell us you can do or be anything that you want to be.
Mm.
And I don't know if everybody had the privilege of being told that by their parents, but we absolutely believed him. And that's why we dreamed bigger, than Newell, South Dakota. I wanted to go see the world and I wanted to make a difference. I wanted to figure out who I am and where I fit into the world. And I don't think that I ever would have had the courage to do that if it wasn't for, seeing him and seeing some of the challenges that he faced in his lifetime. And he has since passed, but my first book that I wrote was actually dedicated to him because he was always such an encourager and always so forward thinking. And looking back now, I don't think I realized at the time the incredible obstacles that he was overcoming right in front of us and doing it, with such tact that we never really had any idea, the big, huge things that were happening in the world. For example, the Buffalo market completely crashed, the housing market crashed. I'm sure you remember that. I didn't at the time personally. I just didn't pay attention to the news, but those were huge things in our world that he had to overcome. And, part of what made that happen is he wasn't afraid to pivot. He wasn't afraid to take on a new challenge and to dive headfirst into an industry that maybe he didn't come from. So kind of long story short, but when the Buffalo market did crash, my dad got his real estate's license and kind of went in that direction. And at the time, there wasn't social media or a bunch of seminars or even podcasts that you could go and listen to see what you were getting into. He had to go to a library and check out a book or just literally think of it from thin air because knowledge was not near as accessible as it is now. And I remember, at his first real estate office, people who wanted to purchase properties had to come in and look at a physical flip book
Mhm.
of printed out sheets. So it's crazy to have been able to, think that big at that point in time. So if he could do it, I can do it. And of course, everybody, I think we all have challenges in our lives and things where we end up having to pivot. And nobody's path is going to be completely straight. So you've got to roll with the punches and, just accept the fact that life is kind of like a roller coaster and to be okay to give something up and just wait for the next thing that's coming because like my dad or even like me, I didn't realize what's coming is so much better than what I had planned. And
Mhm.
if I had just given up, I never would have gotten there. So yeah, the first thing that came to mind when you asked me that question, absolutely my dad. He was just a
Oh,
pillar and a shining example.
I love that so much. And there's so many nuggets in what you've just said about um it kind of it sounds like you were a bit shielded as a kid from some of
Mm-hmm.
these things, but I give kudos to your dad for not having the news on 24/7 because
Yeah, we were running outside anyways. We wouldn't have
that
listened.
is, I think, a big part of how we can survive as humans is to turn the
Yeah,
news off. But that's a whole other
yes.
soapbox. But uh, it's about that mindset of, okay, well, what's next, or what could I do that's different, and not being kind of stuck in, well, I'll
Mm-hmm.
just keep trying to do the same old, right? And hearing that message of you can do anything and be anything is such an amazing catalyst, especially from someone who had full belief in you, right? And there are sometimes we have to borrow that to grow it ourselves and see it ourselves. But what an inspirational story of just kind of hearing the legacy that he has, left for all of you to step into. That's amazing.
Thank you. Yeah. Yeah, it was really fun to grow up and watch him do those things. And I do want to bring up the first story that he ever taught us about finances and the first time that I ever thought of money differently because I think it's important, as parents or even as just husband and wife, I have a spouse now, to talk about money, to not be afraid of it, and to come up with some strategies around it. But when we were younger, my dad gave each of us three kids one yearling buffalo calf. And he said, you're going to have to, pay for its feed, pay for all of the vaccinations, everything that's done with this calf. We'll keep track of it in a book. And at the end of the year, you're going to make a decision. You can sell that calf for whatever, market price is, and you make quite a bit of money. And as a young girl, I had no concept of like $100 or 1,000. Like, is that
Right.
good? What can we buy? Can I buy a pony? But then he also said, or you can continue to raise this calf, and when this calf is old enough, and he gave us heifers, he said, you can breed her. I'll give you the breeding for free. And then, once their calf is old enough, you will have a calf to sell every year for probably 10, 15 years, however long. Or, you can continue this and keep multiplying. And so as a young girl practicing that restraint was, I'd never ever thought of that before. I never had thought of, residual money, not that it's completely residual, but the long-term building of something that's more satisfying than instantly right now. Would you like to, go have a snow cone or a t-shirt or a pony? So for as a young girl, that was the very first time that, I ever thought about money and restraint. And so I think that was such an important lesson, because as I have grown up, I realized, kids don't understand that. And as much as he taught us, even when I got out into the real world, I didn't know what it felt like to be broke. And I learned that, unfortunately. But you're up against so much if you're uneducated about money and about finances, and you can really do damage just with lack of education, and being, scared to face it. So I think that was super important that he kind of equipped us with growing up.
Oh, Jenna, thank you so much for bringing that up. We could have a whole other episode on just
Yeah,
this topic.
sure.
It's one that I've had my own learning journey, and it is so powerful. And as you were talking about, like, what a great way to teach finances to kids,
Yes,
like,
that's
in
what I
that.
thought now. I appreciate it so much more now. Right.
Right? I was thinking like, well, there's a legacy right there, because there's kind of that compounding effect of, we think of it as residual income, but there's also that compounding interest of what that kind of lineage of, I probably not using the right terms, but the lineage of calves down the road really transitions into something entirely different than kind of that first gift, and how
Mhm.
powerful that is. And I so encourage families to talk about money, to share those lessons, and not in just the allowance manner, but you had a responsibility.
Mhm.
And that puts it in a real different category than here's your allowance for doing the
Yep,
chores. Like,
absolutely.
so what a we're gonna put a pin in that one, because we're
Good. Yeah, that
gonna come back and talk more
I do
about
want to
that.
bring up, though, too, the first book that he encouraged us to read was Rich Dad Poor Dad. I don't know if you've heard of that one, but that
Yes,
is
I
a
have.
wonderful concept, and it's
It
applicable
is.
to all ages. It's like the first book I would ever tell somebody to go read if they're curious about financial literacy. And then there's also a board game that comes along with that called Cash Flow. It's like Monopoly, but it's more real world. And Monopoly is great too, just because, if you buy these hotels, you buy,
Yeah.
these assets, then you're going to get ahead. And that's, the same concept that cash flow has, but it's just way more detailed and realistic. So,
I love that. And I think the other piece of this is really making this a conversation at home, right? And
mm-hmm,
that your dad suggested that book, which is universal to a lot of business and
mm-hmm,
entrepreneur mindset, I think is really significant, because it's not that these topics were avoided, but they were actually, you got to experience them.
mm-hmm,
And to come full circle back to what you talked about earlier, if you've had an experience with something, whether it's that first breakup or having to get the calf to at least whatever age they need to be to have another one, uh, yeah, you've had an experience of knowing how to do something. It may not be exactly what the next challenge is, but
mm-hmm.
it's
It
something
plants
that
that
you,
seed.
yeah, there's a foundation there. And how how enriching that is to serve you well throughout everything that you may be dreaming about doing in life. So
Mhm.
what an amazing
I wish I could
experience.
say, that I took that advice and it's been smooth sailing, but it's almost comical that I had, such a great foundation and was able to still, just go completely broke chasing my dreams and feel like I had nothing and had to restart from absolute ground zero, if not below. So I really do feel for people that either don't have that growing up or they find themselves in a similar situation, because it is very scary as an adult when the stakes are really high. It's your life and your livelihood, and yeah, that's a big part of my story for sure.
And that's where the meaning comes from. And I think maybe that's where you're wanting to share it out with
Hmm.
others.
And I feel like
As
it's so taboo, to talk about.
well.
And
Uh-huh.
that's what I wish that I, could have read or could have listened to and consumed when I was kind of going through that, because I was so embarrassed by it that I definitely didn't want anyone to know that was happening. And, after going through it, realizing you're actually going to go through financial struggles again. You're going to continue to gamble. You're going to take risks, but it can be more calculated. You can set up some safety nets, and that yeah, you will rise again, and it is okay. Most entrepreneurs, I think, actually end up going broke. And to me, I'd rather follow somebody like a leader that has a bit of a limp, a bit of a scar, a story to have overcame, versus somebody who's really just been given things or hasn't really reached that part of entrepreneurship yet. So it's more common than I realized at the time, and I definitely want to speak to other girls, young women, and anybody who's kind of going through a similar struggle, because it's probably more prevalent than you think. And part of my story is showing that if you knew me during that time, you would have never known what I was actually going through. And to kind of give you a summary, I went broke pursuing my dreams of becoming a pro barrel racer, which I did become pro, but that road is grueling. The competition is very, very good. And yeah, it was the time of my life, don't get me wrong, but financially we're definitely spending more than we were ever winning, and we just kind of got into a situation where we couldn't go anymore, my horse and I. Um, but yeah, you would have never known that via social media, or even in my immediate friend group. I was just struggling, trying to get by, and wanted to keep that facade that I was okay, that I could keep up, that we're thriving, I'm just about to make a breakthrough. But yeah, really what was about to happen was a breakdown.
What was the turning point for you? What
Well,
changed?
my horse actually got hurt, which I,
Mhm.
I would never want to cause him any pain, but it was almost a relief in that I had a reason to stop. I just felt like, okay, we're done. We're going to come off the road. We need to regroup. This is actually an emergency. And it was so much worse than I realized, because I refused to really look. I just kept hoping and thinking right around the corner, we're one big win away from this all turning around, but that's just not the case. And when you kind of get into that snowball effect, things compound. So late payments make the actual payment so much bigger, and now you're in trouble. And yeah, that's a scary road to go down. But it worked out in my favor that the injury happened when it did, and I kind of went home to regroup. And now I need to make money fast, and we don't just mean covering current bills. I've created a hole.
Mhm.
And so while I was, applying for different jobs, I was working whatever I could get. I was, bartending, I was doing some work at the racetrack really early in the morning, and driving, Uber and Lyft in between, which I would have just been mortified to let anybody know at the time. But I was doing whatever I could, and it was not enough. I was in a financial hole that could not ever have patched, which is scary, for people with kids or for people who don't have certain options to fall back on. But what I was trying to do was find something in intelligence, because I had spent, nine years in the military doing that. That's really
Mhm.
where my experience was, and I knew that was probably the only worthwhile job that I could get that would actually make a dent in my finances. And so, being in that spot, I ended up signing a contracting job for a year long in Afghanistan that I know now was not good money in contracting, but at the time seemed like just the biggest saving grace to ever come my way. And it was almost serendipitous in the fact that had I not signed this contract, I didn't even know it at the time, but like 1 week later, my security clearance would have lapsed. And if you
Oh,
let
wow.
that lapse, good luck working any classified jobs because it's so expensive to get that
Back.
back, but the military will do it for you, but it expires after 5 years, and I did not even know it. So in the background, things were actually happening for me, and this was right on time. And had I resisted even a week, I honestly don't know what I would have ended up doing, but I signed my life away. I went to Afghanistan and I had to spend a year because in the contract, if you quit and came home early, you had to pay that salary back.
Lovely.
Wow. Yeah. And I had been to Afghanistan before in the military, way different as a contractor. And of course, things change rapidly, just on in the battlefield. But I was, happy to just have a roof over my head, well, a tent over my head to sleep in, 3 square meals a day at the chow hall. Like life was good. And in that role there, I was able to just step out of the chaos and give myself a minute to breathe, to think, and to just figure out what it is I want to do with my life because what I had been doing was not working. And I thought that was how my story was going to end, that it was a Cinderella story on the way to being, a finalist at the National Finals Rodeo. And I just was so dead set on that being it. But when I got to Afghanistan, there was so much time to think because you're really kind of there somewhat alone. You're surrounded by plenty of people, but you're alone with your thoughts a lot. And a whole year to do that was actually the very best thing that ever could have happened to me.
Wow.
So it didn't, happen immediately, but after some reflecting, I started up my podcast, which I don't do any longer, but it was a way to still feel connected to that world, still learn and figure out what facet of the horse industry maybe fits me best, or how are other people making it work in the horse world, because I still want to be there too. And I also realized the need for financial literacy. So I thought back to what I know about it. And first of all, real estate, obviously, most people who are financially independent or wealthy, they are in real estate. They just are. So that is worth learning about. I got my real estate's license while deployed just for the ability to learn and to get into different rooms with that. And it was, just the tip of the iceberg. But I also knew we needed to, as soon as possible, get into real estate and get some equity because in the world of real estate, time is your biggest asset. And over time, you're going to grow in equity doing nothing, just in owning a home or a rental. 5 years goes by and boom, instant equity. So after fixing my credit and saving up a little bit, I did get a house that was, embarrassing probably to put online. It was 150,000.
It's
I
a
never would
place
have
to
showed
start,
anybody
right?
but I thought, I'm going to learn, I'm going to figure out how to renovate this property slowly over several years, but I'm going to fix it up and I'm going to sell it and make money. And yeah, that was like the beginning of a completely new path that I'm now so happy to have found. And in that, I also met my husband. We met in Afghanistan, the romantic city of Bagram. And I ended up getting a much better contracting job that allowed me to actually fly. Instead of doing the mission planning, I went on to the actual plane to do the missions, which was great, very cool. And those guys had a schedule that was 2 months at home not working and 2 months deployed, and they were making more than I was making in Afghanistan full time. So yeah, it was definitely a
It's
good
so,
shift.
yeah, it's so interesting how the universe carves that, it's there for
Yeah,
you, right? And had it not been for one thing and your horse having an injury, things could have been so different, yet it
yes,
allowed
they could have.
you to knit into what was planned. And
Mm-hmm. And now I
so
just look
powerful.
back with such gratitude, and I don't know how I ever could have felt that in the moment because it
Mhm.
was so painful. I mean, the most painful thing I've ever experienced, other than losing my dad, but it was, every day painful for a very long time leading up to and then going through it. And even, years after, it just took so long to be able to talk about it and to be okay with how we ended up, because thank God I got here. And I couldn't have without all of that just chaos and crumbling of who I thought I was. So,
It's so amazing how our biggest challenges are often that biggest lesson, but also
mm-hmm,
a blessing, right? And like you said, it's not always evident right in that moment. And over the years, I've learned as these challenge moments happen to think, what am I to learn from this? Or this is good because, or what's the lesson here? Instead of
yeah,
right? And you've lived that kind of transformation of mindset about what you went through, but also to be, thank you so much for being courageous and sharing that with others, because I think this really is the piece of life and entrepreneurship and even self leadership that people don't talk about.
mm-hmm.
We have these highlight reels, like you said, like I didn't want to put the house on the social media, yet that really carved the path for you of kind of the steps to where you are now. So I just it, I love these conversations because they are so full of these inspirational moments, and it just when you said it really was a blessing to be in Afghanistan. Not too many people would be saying this, but it does sound like a lot of good things happen.
Yeah, I have such honestly fond memories of Afghanistan.
Yeah.
And even at the time, I was kind of like, wow, this is terrible. Like, I'm in a dusty tent surrounded by men that stink, and like, I'm doing a pretty stressful job. And, there are a lot of challenges in the moment, but it's easier to look back and think, that actually was exactly what I needed. And those
Mhm.
stressful missions took my mind completely away from my shallow little world. And honestly, one of the turning points that I remember is the first mission that I was on, that somebody lost their life, that US forces lost their life. And I had never been that close to that before. Like, you may read it or it may come on a briefing, but to think like, just out my window or like through this camera screen, like down there, like this is happening, like how insignificant is it that I just, I'm so heartbroken that I can't pro rodeo,
Mhm.
like this person has just given their life. Like it was just completely eye opening. And then, on the other side of the plane, like these are the mountains of Afghanistan, mud huts, people don't have electricity. They don't necessarily want to be involved in, the terrorist organizations, but they don't want to lose their lives. So, imagine dealing with problems like that. It was just so eye opening that
Mhm.
that type of perspective really gives you a better headspace and clarity about whatever your problems are, honestly.
Mhm.
And I think that's one of the keys too that I would share with people is if you do feel down and you are struggling, it's okay, you're completely valid to do that. But if you can find a way to give and find a way to contribute and to go be a part of somebody else's life and help them that's struggling, to me that's so much more fulfilling than getting what it is that you wanted in the first place. That the contribution and growth aspect, it will
So
just
empowering.
change you inside, honestly.
Yeah, it's so empowering. And I think that's one of the, well, sometimes it's a hard thing to do, but it is a simple thing to go help someone else. And
Mm-hmm.
the moment that you feel the lowest, being able to help someone else, you have so much perspective on, wow, I guess, there still is something to give,
Yeah.
right? I still have value. I still have a place of service or contribution, like you said. And I think if we can get out the door and help someone else,
Yep.
it also
Absolutely.
takes our mind off where we are, right?
Yeah,
Like,
it does. And it helps change your state too, which I'm a
Mhm.
huge Tony Robbins fan and follower. Going to some of his seminars helped me through difficult times. But he talks about, getting out of your current state. You may
Yeah.
be down and out and depressed. And you can't jump from depressed to complete joy or gratitude, but there's a whole scale. So if you can just start to move the needle a little bit, now the next level becomes more accessible. And now you might be opening your mind to finding the answers about how you can get out of your current situation. And that was a huge revelation too. Like, no one is going to come and give you an easy life or give you the secret or like the answer. It has to come from within. But to get around a crew or in the environment where all of a sudden your mind is open, now you start to think of solutions, options, inspiration, you feel moved to go take action. That's the most valuable place you can put yourself. But it's really hard to do that when you're just feeling depressed and down. Like when I was feeling that, I didn't want to go anywhere. I wanted to hide, stay at home. Definitely not go work for awful jobs for maybe $10, $12 an hour, you know.
Yeah.
But the most important thing to do was to get out, take action, and be around the right energy.
That is an awesome piece of advice. Thank you so much for sharing that. I give everyone a chance to brag on themselves for a moment in terms of what they have going on right now. And so I'm curious what you have that's
Sure.
happening.
I couldn't be more excited to share with the world that I am officially a published author.
Woo!
So yesterday, last night, about 11 p.m., my book was accepted by Amazon and put out into the world. And it was really important for me to publish on the 23rd because that was, my dad's favorite number. There's so many connections that I have to the number 23. I got married on that day. Like my whole world just revolves around like these, signs with the number 23. And so at, 11, whatever it was, I went to make a post and I was using ChatGPT to help me. And ChatGPT told me it was World Book Day on the 23rd. And I just thought, what? So I started looking up World Book Day, and it's, something that you do every year on the 23rd of April is to give someone a book and a rose. And I love gardening. My roses have just come up, and I'm giving this book to the world. And what a fun reunion that I'll literally always remember for it to be on World Book Day. So yeah, that's the first day I am a full-on published author. Very
fantastic. Congratulations. It is it's not a short road to that.
I actually spent 7-8 years writing. So right when all that chaos was happening, I had the idea that I wanted to write about it and tell about it. But through the years, my lessons and outlook and perspective have changed. So I never felt like I could publish yet. I kept working on it, changing it. And it grew actually into 4 books. So this is the first of 4 that is coming, but I'm really glad I waited until now to publish because it feels so good. I mean, I really am proud of what the book is and what it will hopefully help people with and just the knowledge that's in there, because it literally took me a decade to figure out what I had put in there.
Well, I am excited to pick that up and get into it. I just finished a book last night, so this is perfect timing.
Awesome. Excellent.
Jenna, thank you so much for coming on and having this conversation. I am so excited to be connected and to continue our conversations. I just want to thank you so much for spending time today.
Thank you for having me. That was a wonderful conversation, and it's so fun to meet, podcast hosts like you, where I feel like we'll be besties, virtually for a long time. I appreciate it.
And if I get back to Oklahoma,
absolutely look me up.
I'm not sure,
but it might be a move
out. Well, I end all of the episodes with a quote, and I pick them before we come on. I don't, have a clue exactly how our conversation will flow. And what landed for me was knowing your book title, which remind the viewers what your title is.
The first book is Not Enough.
And it's an Enough series. And last night, as I was rounding out my day, I was watching some things come across my Instagram feed, and I follow the Braid sisters, and I think they're from Ireland or overseas. Um, and I don't always listen, but the content was there, and I'm like, this is the quote for today from the Braid Sisters. And she said, before you go to bed tonight, tell yourself you have done enough, you are enough, and you are more than enough just by being here on planet Earth. And it's such a powerful reminder every evening of we have done enough. We've done what we could accomplish today. And I'm so excited for your book series because I feel like just in our conversation here, there's so much you've poured in to that. And I know folks will take a lot away from that. I appreciate you listening in on this episode of the Inspired Hive podcast. Be sure to follow us on social media at Inspired Hive Podcast and subscribe to stay in the loop for future episodes. We're looking forward to our next conversation. Until then, keep living inspired.